Hello, this is Robert Sanchez. I'm a member of the Daily Herald's editorial board. Today I'm having a discussion with the candidates seeking election to the District 46 race for the Illinois State House. We're here today with the incumbent, Diane Sherlock, and the challenger, Robert Stevens. And Representative Sherlock, will you start us off? Just talk a little bit about why you're deciding to run for a second term.
Sure. So I decided to run the first time to serve my community, and in large part because of my children. So I have two children that have disabilities, but because I was able to learn and advocate for them, they're both very successful adults. So one of the things that I've been doing as a state representative is I've served on K through 12 appropriations, K through 12 policy and curriculum, and that has enabled me to get involved in advocacy for special needs children in the school systems. I've also been partnering with District 88 to present a series of seminars for parents of children with disabilities to provide them with information they may not otherwise have access to. I additionally am serving on energy and environment and am vice chair, de facto chair right now of state government administration, which plays into my background as a contracts attorney. I'm running again because my work isn't done. I've just recently been appointed to the House working group on public transit. I'm the only representative on that working group that has their district completely inclusive in DuPage County. And I think that our county has very unique needs in the public transport arena and needs strong advocacy. I also am very familiar with paratransit and senior transport that I think needs some work. So I'm running because I feel that I'm not done. And, when you get to the House, you learn that it's not as simple as Schoolhouse Rock says to get a bill passed. So I've learned a lot in the last 2 years that I think will help me in the next 2 years. And I just like to mention two bills that I had passed and signed into law. I have two bills sitting in the Senate right now, but the two bills that I passed through both chambers, one requires Narcan in schools to address any overdoses as a result of the opioid crisis. And the other allows families under specific circumstances to convert College 529 plan money that they have not used for college into Roth IRAs without penalty. So I've already got some ideas for bills for next session, and I am looking forward to continuing my work. I just want to add one more thing. I'm sorry, I don't know if I have a time frame here, but my office has also been very involved in philanthropic work in the community. We have a knitting group that has donated, as of today, over 1,900 hats, gloves, and scarves to the less fortunate. We're right now in the midst of a toy drive. We're going to do a Love's Purse drive next month. And the things that I've been able to do as a representative that I couldn't do as a private person, I really think have benefited the community, and I'd like to continue to do so. Thank you.
All right, Robert, introduce yourself and talk about why you're running again.
Okay, well, I'm Robert Stevens, aka Rusty. I'm running again pretty much for the same reasons I was running the last time. I think in our representative republic, otherwise known as a democracy, we probably ought to have two candidates. We probably ought to have parity in our government so that there's some checks and balances, and we're able to call on each other for different ideas and maybe different suggestions, look different points of view on different items. And there was, when I went to vote a few years ago, there was no one running in opposition to the Democrats in my district. As I walk the district, I find that there's a lot of people like me, and they would prefer to be able to vote for someone that they felt represents them, and I think I can do that for my district.
So, Mr. Stevens, is there a specific issue, though, that's motivating you?
Well, yeah, I've lived in Illinois for quite some time, and it's been it's been, it's been, you know, run by one party. One of the things that I find that's really on a lot of people's mind is the cost of living and common sense, you know, as far as approaching the issues that affect the cost of living. So that's one issue. There's a number of issues that I'm interested in. I like Diane, I'm concerned about mental health and how we address those issues and methods and methods that we use. Sometimes we tend to throw money at things that we don't need to, and I think that increases overall costs, and sometimes it's not as effective as it could be in with other methods.
Okay, you said you want to address the cost of living. Is there any suggestions on how the state could lower the cost of living for everyday people?
Oh yeah, there's, you know, we have tax increases in perpetuity. Every July 1st, there's a number of things that are automatic tax increases. Taxes go up with the you know, your property taxes go up. As I become older in my life and I look at what I'm going to do, the only variable that I really have is what are my taxes going to be? And they tend to go up. The state budget's ballooned over the last decade, and we've got to start being responsible with other people's money.
Representative Stevens, any thoughts about the whole cost of living issue? Is there anything the state could be doing to help lower the cost for everyday people?
I think you mean Sherlock.
Sherlock, I'm sorry, Sherlock. I apologize.
Okay. Wanted to make sure you were talking to me. Okay. Well, when it comes to property taxes, that's really controlled locally. The only thing that we address at the state level with respect to property taxes are things like exemptions. And I think we all know that the local assessor will increase the tax rate to meet their bottom line. So Springfield doesn't have a ton to do with property taxes. However, I do have two bills pending in Springfield. One is to increase the income level for seniors to get the senior freeze. And the other is to increase the exemption for people with disabilities, which has not changed in many years. I've tried to move those forward, but it's difficult. It's not an easy process. And so I have not been successful in getting those to the floor. There's also a subgroup dealing with property taxes. I think it's difficult, especially coming out of COVID and all the money that came into the state from the federal government that local units of government were told was going to disappear at the end of COVID, or excuse me, when the money ran out. Please don't use this for operating expenses. And yet they use it for operating expenses. So they come to Springfield and they want that money to continue, but we don't have the money to continue. I think that the best thing that we can do is to watch our dollars and cents. I did not grow up with money, and I remember what money means. And when we talk about money, and I hear some people saying, oh, it's only $5 million, I say it's $5 million. Do you have $5 million? It's a lot of money. So I think we have to be careful in how we spend our money, but we're subjected to the same forces that individuals are. There's inflation, there's increased fuel costs. There's a lot of ways that we're trying to address these things. For instance, electrifying school buses will save a lot of money. It's a big upfront expenditure, but it'll save money long-term, and things like that. But we can't forget that government is subject to inflation as well. The costs for us are higher too. It's much more controllable, I think, on a federal level. I've consulted a couple economists on it, and it's much easier to address these things federally than at the state level.
Okay, and so Diane, if you win re-election, is there an issue that's going to be a priority for you?
Well, there are several issues that are priorities for me. One is dual credit. And that's a bill that I got out of the House, but is stuck in the Senate, and I want to continue to do that. I've had several bills brought to me by constituents that I plan on pursuing next year. There's one, Mr. Stevens was talking about common sense, right? Sometimes I find it very frustrating that we have to legislate things that I think are common sense. So for instance, apparently homeowners associations are ticketing first responders for parking their vehicles in the associations, calling them commercial vehicles. Well, that's silly. If you're a firefighter, excuse me, or a police officer and you're on call, you need your vehicle there. So I'll be filing a bill in the spring to forbid homeowners associations from having rules that would prohibit first responders from parking their vehicles at their homes. And it's lots of things like that. There isn't a massive legislative package that I'm proposing, but I plan on presenting several bills. Additionally, I'm going to be working with that transit working group to try and address the fiscal cliff. And a couple of things that I'm looking at with respect to that, and it's early in the process, but they're spending a lot of money, and I don't think there's sufficient accountability. I would like to see more accountability for the expenditures in transit. And I also think we need to do a review of the assets that they own and are holding and acquiring, because I don't know that they're necessarily things that they need. And we may be able to use those monies to address the shortfalls that we're going to have. I'm going to continue pursuing the tax exemption bills, and I will be refiling those in the spring as well.
What did you mean when you say the dual credit? Can you explain what that is?
Dual credit is when a high school student takes a class in high school, but it counts as credit for college. And those are done through agreements with colleges and universities. And there's been some difficulty. It's a real complex bill, but there's been some difficulties between the community colleges and the high school districts, and we're trying to work those difficulties out. Right now, a lot of our high schools are contracting with out-of-state universities or non-public entities to do their dual credit because they can't work out agreements with the community colleges. I would like to build on the relationships between the community colleges and the high schools.
What would I'm sorry, generally speaking, what would the legislation that you're proposing do?
It's House Bill 5020.
Okay.
It does a lot of things, and I passed it through the House. It addresses the education level of the teachers at the high schools and who you can contract with, and it creates a panel that would work out some of the issues that they're having between the high schools and the colleges.
And what's the number? House Bill number?
House Bill 5020.
50. Okay, thank you. Okay. Mr. Stevens, back to you.
There's a whole lot there. I mean, really a whole lot that this Ms. Sherlock put out there. She talked about the local governments and how they, went through the COVID money, but Illinois was granted money to pay down the unemployment expenditures during COVID. They only used 50% of that money to pay down the debt on the unemployment insurance. They put the rest of the money into the general fund. The budget this year is $531 billion, I think, around that number. There was a number of things that of increased expenses and that wouldn't have passed without her vote. Even Democrats voted against some of these increases that she voted for. So it's not the local governments alone that are blowing through money. The state of Illinois is blowing through a lot of money and not living up to their obligations, really.
Okay, well, all right, so what is, okay, let me back up then. So what is your criticism of the state of the finances right now, generally speaking, at the state level?
Well, at the state level, I think they're spending more than they have. They're being irresponsible with the money. I think they really need to look at some of these. Diane mentioned there's assets that they might not need. They may have things that they're spending money on that aren't necessary. I would like to talk about, I don't mean to be um, sarcastic or funny in any way about looking at, how much new furniture are you buying? Are you throwing away things that you don't need in order to meet your budget for this year? And if you don't, I think we should give incentives on different departments that trim their budget and do some effective cost evaluations. Do they really need that much money? If they save $100,000, maybe we can, give them a bonus of $10,000 or something, something like that, just to incentivize looking at their operation and making it more efficient.
Right, but when you say the state's being irresponsible with its money, do you have any specific examples that you want to highlight?
Well, again, I could go back to the IDES with, they were given money to pay that off and they didn't. Now we have a loan for that money, or we have to pay interest on the money that we committed or spent already. I think that was ridiculous. Why didn't you got the money from the federal government, put it where it was supposed to go?
Diane, do you want to respond to
I'm not well versed on this particular thing with IDES. I know that there was a lot of fraud during COVID. That was before my time. I'm not really sure about what instructions happened, but I would like to make a couple of points. One is that I wasn't saying that local units of government, all local units of government did that, or that's the cause for any major financial issues. I'm just saying that, they were instructed, CPS was one of them. They were instructed not to use this money for operations, and they did. And it wasn't a continuing flow of money. So that was supposed to be used for things that were finite and not going on. And they shouldn't be coming asking us to continue to pay for these programs. We don't have the funds to do that. And I feel very firm about that. Another point I'd like to make is that every district, and you probably know this, every representative gets a budget, right? So we get an annual budget that we use for our district office. I did not spend my entire budget. In fact, at the end of the year, there was an extra $9,000. I didn't go crazy and start buying things and trying to spend all this money. I let the $9,000 go back into general funds. So I'm not here trying to, burn through government money. I'm trying to find ways that we can be more efficient. And I just wanted to make that point, but thank you.
Right. What about generally speaking, though, his general point saying that the state in general has been irresponsible with taxpayer money. Do you disagree with that? What's your reaction to that comment?
I'm not going to say that there are no instances of that, because I do think there's instances of that. And that's part of what I think we need to look at in the transit working group. But we had a balanced budget. We have a balanced budget, and we've had quite a few credit upgrades. So, I'm not going to say there's no waste in government, because that would just be untrue.
Yeah. Obviously one criticism of the state has been the pension system, the amount of money that the state owes for the pensions. Diane, what's your thoughts on that topic, and what do you think the state needs to do to address that issue with the pension liability?
Well, I would like to see us, look, I get that a rainy day fund is important, but our rainy day fund has gotten huge. And I would like to see some of the funds that are going into the rainy day fund go into our pension obligations. We're now entering into a problem with tier 2, which a lot of people don't realize the whole tier 1, tier 2 thing. Because I have constituents say, well, why don't you create this other level of pensions? That happened. And that's created a new problem. Because the tier 2 pensions, at least for the teachers, will not be equal to Social Security when they retire. And that's not allowable. So if we don't address that now, there's going to be this major fiscal cliff when the tier 2 teachers start retiring, because we have to pay them a minimum of what Social Security would pay them. I would like to see us put more money annually towards our pension obligations. We need to address the tier 2 problem. And I know that there's a sub working group working on that. But we also have a problem retaining teachers. And I think that saying, well, we're going to give you the equivalent of Social Security is not enough to keep teachers. You know, they don't pay into Social Security. I don't think everybody knows that. Teachers do not get Social Security. All they get is their pension through the state. Maybe there's a way to change that, where they can have a pension and Social Security. But the way it is right now, it's not sustainable. I'm very interested to see what the working group's going to come up with in this area.
Mr. Stevens, what's your reaction to the state of the pension obligation right now? And
Well,
what could the state do to improve the situation?
well, it's something that needs to be addressed. We made promises to people that we need to keep. Going forward, we need to look into some form of change. We really need to change the way we're addressing these pensions. The sudden promotions right before you retire so you get more money, maybe we need to stop doing that. The state's crawling out of its pension hole because of the two-tier system though. And Springfield wants to give away more on pension, just as we are starting to see possible relief. The tier 2 stuff seems to be working. My sister was a teacher, and I know that this is something that she's worried about. This is something that hits home with her, and those people need to be compensated for what they told they were going to be compensated for. Going forward, we need to see some changes.
Wanted to go to a question that actually was on the questionnaire, but we'll stay with you, Mr. Stevens, on this one. How do you feel like the state should respond to the influx of migrants coming from the southern states? Or do you feel like the state's response has been adequate and doesn't need to be changed? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, right off the bat, I think we need to terminate our sanctuary state and city status. I think if you say that you're going to be a sanctuary, well, you're obligated to be a sanctuary. It's not the fault of the people. I think the fault is of the government and their lack of control on the southern border. When we say they're coming from the southern states, they're not coming from the southern states. They're coming from every country in the world. They just happen to be getting here. I mean, the country's so big, only so big. There's opportunity here. If you were coming from somewhere, you'd come here too. Some of these people have relatives here. We're encouraging people to come here, and we're exacerbating the crisis that we're claiming to solve. We need to maybe help these people that are here, but the people that are criminals, we need to maybe send back to where they came from.
Diane, same question. What's your response to, how should the state respond to the influx of migrants, being bused here from the southern states?
Well, to build on some of what Mr. Stevens said, this is really federal, and we're a little limited in what we can do at the state level to keep people from getting sent here, right? But once they're here, I think we have to provide them with the basic necessities of life or they're going to be wandering the streets, and, you know, we're not going to know where they are, and there's not going to be a tracking system. So, you know, I think what we're doing is the bare minimum of what we need to do to keep them safe and keep the people in our neighborhoods safe. But I do think that the federal government needs to step up here, and they need to do things. Now, one of the things the federal government was doing was getting people work approval faster. When we're talking about the non-criminal elements, right? If we could get them work approval, they'll support themselves, right? They want to work. So there needs to be an expedited process for them to get work approval. But we also need to not always look at government for solutions, which is why I can't tell you, it was last year sometime, I had an immigration summit where I invited nonprofits that deal with immigrants into a meeting, and they got to meet each other. They didn't even know some of the other ones existed, and that enabled them to coordinate and facilitate services through nonprofits, not through the government, for the immigrants in a much more efficient way. And I think that as a society, we need to step up. So the group I have that does these hats and scarves, right? We've been giving to the Illinois Community for Displaced Immigrants because we know these people are coming from the South and it's cold and winter is coming. So anything that we can do outside of government to support these communities, I think is helpful. I know a lot of churches in the area do that as well. But the federal government needs to step up here. We don't have the power to deport people, right? So we need our federal government to be more proactive. And I know that there was a bill pending that did not pass in DC, and I think it's a real shame because we need to address these things. However, the flow has slowed considerably. We're not having buses dropped off 4 or 5 times a day right now, and that's a good thing.
Good. We'll stay on you, Diane. The issue of economic development. Do you feel like the state is doing enough to promote economic development statewide? And is the state doing enough to try to get new businesses to move to Illinois?
I think we've done a lot in the last couple of years to get new businesses into Illinois. You know, we've got that, what is it called? The quantum computing coming in, and the governor's been very proactive in bringing new businesses into the state. The microchip manufacturers trying to save the plant up in Belvedere. I think the state's done a lot. Could we do more? We could always do more. But I do think that the state has been very proactive and that this is a very pro-business governor. And that, yes, I think we're doing a lot, but we could always do more.
Okay. Mr. Stevens, same question to you. How do you think the state is doing in terms of economic development? Is the state doing enough to get new businesses to come to Illinois?
You know, I don't think it really does enough to get small businesses back into the state. I'm in an industry, I'm in a trucking industry, and Illinois got one of the largest base plate costs in the country. I think when they increased the cost, there was 20 to 30,000 trucking companies that left the state. Now, just because you increase cost of something that government services, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to bring in more money. If you could lower some of those costs, maybe you'd attract some of those businesses back. I mean, it's just a matter of, you know, if you can get a newspaper in Indiana for 25 cents and it costs you $10 here, where are you going to go? You know, it's that simple. You need to look at things like that. That's just one industry that I know about. I'm not well versed in every industry in the state. These large corporations that the governor wants to bring in get huge tax incentives to come here, and that's how they get them here. So what benefit is that really? It creates jobs. maybe, you know, we should let the small businesses create the jobs. Let some innovation come in here, not just try to snatch people from other states that we're going to give money to. What was it? What's the battery company that's coming into, what is it, Peatone, or I forget where it is. But I think the cost on that was much more than the benefit. What is Goshen? It's like $300 million. It's going to cost us to make 100 million. You know, I don't have the exact numbers, but it was the cost. There was no cost benefit to them coming here. It's stupid.
One thing that we've written about at the Daily Herald is how the state of Illinois is the only state in the nation that mandates regular behind the wheel tests for senior drivers. Stevens, will stay on you. Do you support changing that at all, or leaving it the way we do it now?
No, we're the only state that does that, huh? I'm getting up there, you know, and my livelihood is driving a truck. I've got a Class A CDL. I drive tens of thousands of miles a year. I see a lot of crazy stuff on the road. Not too many of those people are seniors. It mostly comes from younger people on their phones, distracted driving, hot ride, you know, taking chances, which seniors aren't about to do. Seniors are very cautious drivers for the most part. Now, I myself had an issue with my mother. She, you know, we had to take her car keys away from her, and it's, you know, it's a hard thing to do. People get to that point. But the funny thing is that when she went in to go get her license renewed, the state gave her a license. We were the people that had to take it away. So I don't know that this law is effective. I think it's discriminatory, and you know, a lot of times a family is going to have to make the decision, because evidently, even with this law, the state can't.
Right, but the way it works right now, the state mandates the behind the wheel test. I guess my question is, do you support the idea of continuing the behind the wheel testing for seniors, or do you think that should be looked at?
I think it should be looked at. I really do. I think it should be looked at, and I'm not sure how often that happens. I believe it's every 4 years. Every time you renew, you probably have to take a driving test. 49 states don't need it, and we do. It's kind of, I don't know. Why do we need it so much?
Diane, same question. Do you support the idea of continuing the mandated behind the wheel testing for seniors, or do you think that should be changed?
I actually thought it was more frequently than every 4 years. But I think that every 4 years actually would probably be better, because I was of the impression that it was like every year. And I too had to address the inability to safely continue to drive, not only with my mother, but with an aunt of mine. And my aunt lived in Indiana, and she was literally legally blind and allowed to continue to drive. So I do think there needs to be some type of review. Does it need to be what we have currently? I don't know. But I have to have my eyes checked every so many years. You know, I have to go into the DMV and they have to check my eyes. So I do think that there should be something, but I'm not sure that what we currently have is sufficient. I'd like more information, and I'd like input from the people who deal with the aging population.
Right. And just to clarify, Illinois mandates drivers ages 79 to 80 take a road exam if their 4-year license renewal is up. For drivers ages 81 to 86, you have to take it every 2 years.
Right.
Those 87 or older, it's every year.
Yeah.
So just to clarify. So, all right. I just want to make sure, Diane, is there any issue or topic that I haven't asked about that you would like to bring up, that you would like to address?
Oh, I don't think so. I think you did a pretty good job. But thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. Stevens, is there an issue or 75 thing to talk about?
No, not really. I would like to I really would like some sort of restriction from on the state from them passing bills on a Saturday morning at 3 o'clock. I think that's just bad policy, and poor planning, and just not the right way to conduct business. I don't like that stuff at all. A lot of these bills that go through are done in the dark of night, and I think the antiseptic of the sunshine cleans everything.
All right, well, thank you both for.
Can I just say something?
Go ahead.
I would prefer not to vote for things at 3 o'clock in the morning as well. And I actually spent my Memorial Day with my eyes watering trying to read through the budget. So I would like the system to be a little different with respect to those things. And I get it. Trust me, we don't like voting on stuff in the middle of the night either.
Don't.
Thank you.
Wait till, yeah.
Brenda?
Well, again, I'll wrap this up here, but one last question. I asked this, last time, but I'll ask it again. I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Stevens. Why should the voters in the district vote for you and send you this?
Well, I believe I'm representative of the district. I've talked to a lot of people. I'm around the district. One of the benefits of this campaigning thing is that you get to really see what's going on, and how many good people there are in the district. And I've met people that are just taking money out of their own pocket, doing things for people, spending their time and efforts to do nice charitable things for other people. I believe I'd like to include myself in that group, but I just think we need a choice. I think we need a change. I think we need some parity in government, and just for balance. She says she doesn't like 3 a.m. in the morning votes. I don't like 3 a.m. in the morning votes, but it happens because we don't have a balance in Springfield. We have a Democrat majority in control, and they have been for a long, long time. And look where we are.
Diane, give you the last word. Why should the voters in the district vote for you and continue to have you represent them in Springfield?
Thank you. Well, I think that I have been doing a good job. Nobody works harder than me. I work 7 days a week, and I am extremely available to my constituents. I am out in the community, whether it's campaign season or not. I am talking to constituents, knocking doors, going to events, but I'm also hosting events for benefit, that would benefit the community. My job is not, and let me just say, I have town halls every other month, and my office is very responsive. I don't always answer emails, but I try and personally answer as many emails as I can, unless they're generated by a website. Then sometimes I'll get 400 emails in an hour. I cannot respond to those. But I think I've done a good job. I want to continue doing my job. I believe that I have done things that benefit the community, and I would like to think that my hard work warrants re-election.
Very good. Thank you so much for both of you to take your time out this morning. Good luck with the race. It was interesting last time. It'll be interesting to see how it ends up again this time. So thanks a lot again for agreeing to do this.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Bye-bye.